Alrighty, so welcome back, guys, to our second installment of this week examining gender. So, in the last video, we learned that gender is socially constructed in terms for sociologists. We examined the psychological, social, as well as cultural differences of gender, and we're going to learn a little bit more about identity. But remember, gender identity is how do people see themselves. We also examined a lot about gender roles. So those are the expectations that kind of society has regarding males and females. And remember, we kind of were talking about the restrictiveness of male and female too, because you can kind of go between these different roles, right? Say, for instance, you're a female who enjoys mowing the lawn or shoveling, right? Those are typically perhaps seen as male roles, but you can kind of go in between, or males that like cooking, right? One thing that I would really like to delve further into is, even though that females are kind of expected to do the cooking and cleaning in households, it's men who are really regarded as like chefs in the professional realm of things. So that's kind of an interesting aspect there. And then just a little bit more about thinking about traditional gender roles, right? So examining, for instance, with boys versus girls, right? And this is one of the things that absolutely irked me with my introduction to sociology teacher. He would always say almost every week, girls are sugar and spice and everything nice, like that cliche. And it drove me up the absolute wall because I am not sugar and spice and everything nice. I'm pretty the opposite. I don't know if it's not the opposite of it, right? But oh man, it just drove me up the wall. But anyway, so those are kind of traditional thinking, right? And he was really old and a lawyer and stuff. But anyway, so thinking about traditional gender roles, thinking about the soft, emotional, and being sweet and that kind of thing. Whereas with boys, you're supposed to be active, aggressive, tough, and very hands-on. Whereas girls, you're supposed to use your language. Come on, and share, and that kind of thing. And another great one, another musical reference. I told you you're gonna get a lot today, but I don't know. It's just all my musical knowledge coming in as one. And thinking about the musical Mean Girls, which is also, for those of you who know the movie, they made it into a musical. There's an entire song about boys get to fight and girls have to share, right? So why is that? Why do we have to be sharing girls, and why do boys get to kind of be more aggressive and things like that? What happens when girls are aggressive, right? So anyway, that's another musical. And then in thinking about um, homophobia, that's again, remember the fear and prejudice of going against these kind of traditional norms, going against homosexuality and thinking about sexuality. And those who kind of deviate from these traditional gender roles and gender expectations. For instance, if you're a guy and you paint your fingernails, or if you're a girl and you kind of do stuff that's, if you like to hunt and do a lot, like work on your car and things like that, and that kind of thing, you're kind of presumed to be seen as deviant, and are often presumed to be gay just because you kind of go against the norm, right? But what happens if you're kind of in a family of mechanics, or what happens if you paint your nails because you're a baseball player, right? Like, nobody comments about that. So, and I also kind of have different comics that we'll be kind of going through throughout this lecture series, and it's from the See Red Women's Workshop. And they have different comics, kind of just kind of examining the different gender roles and what happens because of gender roles and everything like that. So in this, in case you can't read it, it says it's a picture of a little girl and her mom, and it's saying, "I am helping mommy to dust. I am helping to sweep the floor. Peter helps Daddy with the car, and Jane helps Mummy get the tea. Good girl," says Mummy to Jane. "You are a good girl to help me like this. Good, good girl." Jane thinks, "Stuff this. It's about time I get myself out of these sexist books and start giving girls an example of all the other things we can do." It says, "Right on, Jane, right on." Because I'm thinking about it, for instance, if you run like a girl, there's a video that I'll also link regarding this that I think Always did. What does it mean to run like a girl, right? Usually if you say, oh, you run like a girl, or you do something like a girl, it's seen to be weak, right? But it's actually, how do people perceive that? So I'll have you guys watch that video too. So, and thinking about identification, right? That's how people see themselves. You could be seeing yourself as male, female, something in between, something entirely different, and that kind of thing. There is a lot to kind of go on there. And when we think about sexual identity, usually we're talking about sexual orientation, right? The self-awareness of being romantically or sexually attracted to a defined group of people, but it might also be too that you're aromantic or asexual. And that is totally a-okay as well. So there's a lot, and you can kind of see up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a enormous spectrum sexual preferences and gender identity and all of that. And if you're interested in more of this, man, I don't even know where to start for a rant about that, but there's a ton of information about that too. So, and as a person who wants to go into sexuality and gender studies for one of my concentrations for my PhD, I would love to talk more about it. I'm kind of thinking too about the effect that music has, which is something that a lot of you were wondering for your research project, right? For instance, with Kesha's We Are Who We Are, right? That was kind of a big thing, or the I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It song. I don't even remember who sang that, I'm drawing a blank, but there's so many other songs too that kind of examined what it's like to have like a different, to kind of go against the norm. Oh, I did have an animation. There we go. So, there you go. There's the image a little bit more clear. And again, there's a lot more that this doesn't cover, but it's just to kind of get the point, or just to kind of get you thinking about identity and orientation. And then I thought this was an interesting thing as well, especially when it comes to healthcare, right? Knowing how you identify yourself as and what parts do you have and that kind of thing is really important from a healthcare standpoint, because that way you're hopefully, if you go to a good doctor's office, that's another thing we can talk about. They're going to really care about who you are and how you identify and different things that are going on within you, to make sure that you are given the best care possible, as well as the different diseases like STDs and things like that that you might come across due to your identification and all of that. So I just thought this was a kind of an interesting graphic. Sorry, I'm just looking at it because you notice more things the more you stare at it. But it's a galaxy of limitless possibilities, which I don't know, I kind of like the sound of that. So yeah, so it's very important from a healthcare standpoint as well. And unfortunately, we won't get into healthcare stuff in this class. I wish we would, but like medical sociology is literally also a whole entire realm of soc. But kind of just thinking about the different types of care that people get because of their gender. For instance, if you're a woman, you're probably more likely to have doctors think that you're lying to them, or just basically that your complaints aren't being heard simply because you are a woman. And that's extremely frustrating for a lot of us because things get not identified very well or ignored, and you just get extremely sick about going to doctor after doctor and not being heard. Versus perhaps if you're a male, you're a man, that you don't necessarily want to go to the doctor's office because that kind of demonstrates that, oh, something's wrong with you, or oh, it's kind of, you're not strong, you're not tough because you're going to the doctor's office, even though we should all be going to the doctor and getting checked for everything, getting physicals and stuff like that, right? That all connects to healthcare, but again, another branch for another day. See, with this type of stratification, you can just kind of connect everything. Kind of similar to race and ethnicity, as well as class and poverty. All this kind of just ties together, which we'll see in our theory video, which is, I think, in the next installment. So, in addition to identity, this is kind of where the book doesn't go off into. And for those of you who do identify with the LGBTQ plus community, or who are allied with it and things like that, I have a lot of students complain that the book sucks on this section of it, and so I kind of just wanted to address that. And a big reason for why there isn't a lot of information about the community is because of the history of it. And one famous example, which I'm also going to include, so you guys have a lot of supplemental materials for this week, includes this little section from a textbook that I had to read during grad school, and it's called Broken Windows at Blues, A Queer History of Gentrification and Policing. So this is a little bit of an article that gives a history about a riot that happened at Blues. Well, basically what Blues is a bar, and it got raided back in 1982. So in September 1982, over 30 New York City police officers raided Blues, which is a bar in Manhattan's Times Square. And many Black and Latino, gay men, and trans people who were the bar's main clientele, so it was a queer bar, were extremely beaten, and not a lot of reporting was done on this incident. And so it kind of just examines why that is, as well as a criminological theory which is called broken windows. But it examines the labeling of this bar as a very troublesome bar with a lot of undesirables, where probably a lot of narcotics are used, and you guys can read the article. But it really examines the history of the LGBTQ community, and examining how it would be like in the 80s as a gay person. So I actually had to do a report on this for my Injustice class. It's just very fascinating. I'm reading the article as I'm talking to you guys, so multitasking is not doing very well. But I'm kind of examining the things that occurred because of this event. And so Saul Kanelitz, who is indeed the person who I have the speech bubble over here, this was the reaction to it. People were outraged on a couple of levels. There was no media coverage, and the raid was right across the street from the Times. People were outraged over the violation of a gay safe space. The police thought that the raid would make the community more invisible, but it had the opposite effect. A call was made for people to demonstrate in Times Square, and people from all sectors came out to say no to racist, anti-LGBTQ police violence. So this kind of really moved during the 80s, especially with everything that was going on then. And this was a time where gay safety activism was moving to a national stage, having gay neighborhoods and just making sure that people who identified as such weren't being attacked on the streets, which happened in earlier decades. So making sure, kind of protecting their rights and that kind of thing. And this piece that I am linking you guys to just kind of examines the history of New York's involvement with the gay community and policing it. So this kind of brings our chapter on crime and deviance and norms in with understanding identity a little bit closer, especially regarding, and here's a quote for from the article. Here, gay identity functions in opposition to disorder. The people marked for dispossession in the new economy may be targeted in the name of gay safety. So examining policing and how everybody should be given a safe space. And that's kind of a main key point of the broken windows theory too, is the perception of safety. So I'll leave you guys, if you're kind of interested, the link below the link to this video for you. And it also examines, it leads to another example in thinking about the LGBTQ community, examining it via more of a musical, as well as just different shows and TVs and things like that, right? Getting the knowledge out there about the different things that these people experience, as well as how their lives have been changed by different things as well. With falsettos in particular, this is the reboot of it. It was premiered back in 1992, and it examines the 70s and 80s, but it was revived back on Broadway in 2016, and the revival performance was nominated for 5 Tony Awards, which is basically one of the biggest. It's kind of like the Oscars for musicals, but the awards that they were nominated for, they didn't win because Hamilton basically took all of them. So, and this show is very timely because of the of this blues raid that I was just examining, because it talks about the early 80s and late 70s, where it examines the rise of the AIDS epidemic, because back then, and this show kind of demonstrates the knowledge growth of it, they just knew that it was a bad disease and that was being spread, but there really wasn't anything that they could do for it. So I'll be linking a couple shows for you guys, but I just absolutely really enjoy this musical because it does examine all the different kind of dysfunctions, so to speak, of relationships, and how relationships can be so real and so messy because of the different things that society kind of forces you to do, right? The guilt that you might encounter because your identity isn't what society says it should be, in addition to not being happy with your job, or just being a person who identifies as something that society says that perhaps you shouldn't be identifying as. So it's a really good musical. I enjoy it. I cry all the time because of the ending, but that's just another example. Another famous one is Rent, which the diversity community actually showed a couple weeks ago with that. And there's some issues with Rent, as well as with any musical, really, right? It can't get it depiction kind of perfect, but it does expose the different life challenges that people during this time frame were experiencing, especially due to the withheld information, or as well as just the lack of information with the community. So anyway, I'll kind of stop there. So that'll be it for my dive in identity. Obviously, there's just so much more to examine and talk about, but I'll kind of leave it there for now. In the next video, we're going to be examining how our theories kind of evolve or examine stratification. So I'll see you guys next time.